Welcome to the Daily Report for July 23rd, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. New jobs gained, old jobs lost. Vice President Kamala Harris surfs into Wisconsin on a river of fresh cash and endorsements. Her first campaign rally as the all but certain Democratic nominee. The Secret Service Director fulfilled the bipartisan hopes of Democrats and Republicans who wanted her to resign. By doing so, the investigation into the botching of protecting former President Trump continues. Also giving in to the calls for removal, newly convicted New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is stepping down. Someone somewhere is going to be out of a job as Delta still struggles to get back up after that massive global computer outage. And trouble on the horizon. Our Nicole Skanga reports on Russian disinformation tactics and how they could affect our elections in November. Also this fall, school starts, and the COVID learning gap still weighs down students. And finally, who is the new game show face of the Forever Stamp? It's not a question, but an answer. All answers for that stamp must be phrased in the form of a question. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the Rip Van Winkle moment for Democrats. After a lost month fretting over its previous nominee, the party appears to have awakened and reached for the checkbook. The Harris campaign says it raised more than $100 million between Sunday and Monday night. That's almost half of the $240 million the Biden campaign had in the bank before his endorsement of her over the weekend. Harris's schedule was quick to adapt to the campaign challenge. She has at least 4 appearances on the books this week. She spoke Monday at the campaign headquarters in Delaware. Tuesday, she was in Milwaukee for her first official rally since Biden stepped aside.
Do we want to live in a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law? Or a country of chaos, fear, and hate? We each have the power to answer that question. And in the next 105 days, then we have work to do. We have doors to knock on. We have phone calls to make. We have voters to register. And we have an election to win.
Harris also secured 2 key endorsements Tuesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
President Joe Biden has made the selfless decision to pass the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, who is ready, willing, and able to lead us into the future.
We begin our next chapter, and it will be our best yet. Vice President Harris will beat Donald Trump and become the next president of the United States of America.
Meanwhile, President Biden says he will address the nation from the Oval Office Wednesday night for the first time since announcing he was leaving the race. USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page joins me now to sort through all of this. Susan, let's talk about the money first. What the Harris campaign has brought in has come, a majority of it, from first-time donors, about 62%. Why is that important?
Because you can go back to them over and over and over again for more contributions. That's the gift of small donors. They don't max out because they tend not to give too much at one time. But that is a huge resource for them. And, you know, in an instant, Kamala Harris has erased the fears that Democrats had started to have that they were going to be at a real financial disadvantage against Donald Trump. Now she's very much in a position to be competitive and more.
One of the questions on Sunday, as we were all putting together the list of the to-do list she had, which was considerable, being given with this surprise new job, was what is labor going to do? Is she going to be able to lock down the different constituencies as a part of the Democratic base? Well, the country's biggest federation of unions, AFL-CIO, endorsed her. Does that mean she's got labor on her side? And can you assess how she's done in terms of kind of those first things she had to do to lock down the party?
Well, she did well with labor at the start, but she doesn't have the UAW yet. That's a big one. We think that the UAW is likely to endorse her, but they probably want some commitments on specific policies beforehand. But she's done, I mean, there are going to be tough days ahead for Kamala Harris. There'll be times when she's under attack or she slips on the stump or whatever. But she's had a remarkable start, beginning with getting labor support, getting the endorsements of all the Democratic governors, most of the Democratic senators, most of the Democratic House members, and basically precluding anybody else from emerging as a contender for this nomination. And that is a remarkable feat in the space of a day or two after President Biden's announcement.
Yeah, the old Will Rogers line, I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat. It's no longer true. They seem to have whipped themselves into line here. Is anybody saying, hey, maybe we're moving a little too fast in the Democratic Party? Anybody of stature saying that?
So Democrats are united now. Let's not assume they'll be united for another 100 days.
Yeah.
The Democrats are still divided on some issues. Israel and Gaza would be an important one. Immigration is another one that may be tough. But at the moment, Democrats are falling in line, and they also seem to be falling in love. I mean, you look at her speech today in Milwaukee to a big audience, pretty big audience, 3,000 people. There was a sense, I think, among Democrats in that hall, and also just generally nationwide, of great relief that while they appreciated Joe Biden and they thought he'd done a good job as president, they weren't very energized about supporting him for another term. That has changed. That energy gap, that enthusiasm gap that Democrats have been facing, that seems to have been addressed in a big way as well.
We are in the high moment of vice presidential speculation. I feel like I was asked about it, half a dozen times today. What is a wise thing that we can say or think about the vice presidential process? We've all heard a lot of the names, but how do you approach that? How to think wisely about the vice presidential process?
Well, it seems really crucial now, and it is very important. It's her first big decision and one she'll have to live with. On the other hand, people vote for the president. We know that. It's rare for a vice president to have very much influence on who wins an election. That said, you mostly want somebody who does no harm. You don't want to choose Tom Eagleton and then have to undo it in a messy way. So you want to make a choice that is going to stand up and not become enmeshed in controversy. And if ideally, you want somebody who fills in a gap for you. And most of the working assumption in Washington is that she will choose a white man, since she's a woman of color. That's a breakthrough kind of position for the presidency, that she will choose a white man office holder for this job.
Tom Eagleton, the vice presidential candidate for only 18 days in 1972 for McGovern. Final question, Susan. How are Republicans responding to the Harris presidency, or presidential campaign, I should say, and are they adapting to this new challenge?
Well, they insist that they're prepared for this, and they've been working on backup plans, Plan B for this since May. But they look a little unnerved, actually. They had this campaign. They were confident they could win against Joe Biden based on his age. Well, by the way, now the old guy on the ticket running for president, that would be Donald Trump at 78. So I think there's a little bit of a pivot going on with Republicans, but they will find their footing, I am sure, and attack Kamala Harris in ways that are as fierce as the attacks they had leveled against President Biden.
Susan Page with USA Today. Susan, thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, John.
The head of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has resigned 10 days after an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Cheatle wrote in a letter to staff, quote, "The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our national leaders and financial infrastructure. On July 13th, we fell short on that mission." CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has more on her departure.
Kimberly Cheatle, a 30-year veteran of the U.S. Secret Service, stepped down under intense pressure from members of both parties here in Congress. She lost the room during her testimony on Monday before the House Oversight Committee, not just because of the calamitous nature of the failure July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, the near assassination of former President Donald Trump, but because members of Congress told us they were not satisfied with the answers or the lack of answers from Cheatle to their questions. They were pressing her on what evidence has been gathered, what they know about motive, the timeline of the shooter, what was missed. And so often during the hearing, during the 6-hour hearing, Cheatle said she couldn't provide specifics because of an ongoing FBI investigation at the scene and an ongoing Secret Service investigation into the failures. In her letter today to her colleagues, she says this incident does not define the U.S. Secret Service. President Biden, in a statement, credited Cheatle for her integrity, but also said he looks for the results of an independent investigation of what went wrong that Saturday night. And now there are multiple investigations, not just the Secret Service internal probe and that FBI probe. The U.S. House on Tuesday launched a bipartisan panel to review the attempted assassination. There is a Homeland Security Department review underway and an Inspector General review of what went wrong at the farm field in Butler, Pennsylvania. John?
Scott McFarland, thank you. Former Secret Service Deputy Director and CBS News consultant A.T. Smith joins me now. A.T., thanks for being here. Is it...
Thank you for having me.
We know it's a principle of leadership that the person at the top has to take responsibility when there's a huge mistake like this. But is there something about the particulars of this case that the director is actually to blame for, or that the larger institution is to blame for?
I think there's still a lot of work yet to do. There'll have to be some questions asked, very hard questions, about folks that were on the ground there who conducted the security plan, if you will, who did the walkthroughs, who ultimately signed off on the plan. She is the head of the agency, and so she has to take that responsibility. And unfortunately, yesterday you saw a bipartisan effort from both sides of the aisle to continue to sort of rout her, if you will. And, you know, it was unfortunate, but with some of the questions that she was not as forthcoming with as I thought maybe she could have been, I think that just intensified the result of that hearing yesterday. And by the end of the day, there was just no light left. And I don't think there was any other choice for her. I think she did that in the right way. It's for the good of the men and women of the Secret Service as well as the agency itself.
Let me ask you about a Washington Post report that says that the Secret Service, and so far I think it's just the Post reporting this, the Secret Service is going to ask the Trump campaign to just have indoor rallies. Is that, what do you make of that? And is that the kind of suggestion that might come in the wake of this assassination attempt?
That makes it easier in terms of the security plan, you know, if there is an easy way to do it. Obviously, outdoor events are very, very tough. They're problematic. And we saw that. We saw the result of really what happened at an outdoor event, and maybe the planning wasn't exactly perfect, as we now know. But certainly an indoor venue is safer and easier because you don't have these high ground issues that, you know, obviously were encountered on Saturday. And, you know, there was a lot of reporting about that building and how close it was. That is a question yet to be answered. There is no way that that building should not have been covered within 130, 140 yards of where the former president was on the stage. And anytime you put a counter sniper team in play and put them on top of a building, their responsibility is up to 1,000 yards. I've said that many times. And so with an open field, an outdoor event, it is problematic. And so therefore, if they listen and do go ahead and start to do only indoor rallies, that will make it somewhat easier for the Secret Service to secure.
Are there any other suggestions or thoughts like that you have or that are being kicked around that would make sense for limiting the exposure, or that might, just might change operations in the wake of this?
Well, I think one of the things that I saw personally that was problematic is the fact that they were using a local counter sniper team to assist them. Now, I'm not saying anything negative about those officers and their abilities, but I don't believe when it comes to special teams, whether it's the counter sniper team, the counter assault team, that the Secret Service should outsource their responsibility. Because if you have another team from a local agency, they are clearly going to be operating on a different platform, on a different communications system or radio. And so whenever something does happen, like seeing this individual, and now there's radio traffic about who's going to check on him, where is he right now, there are seconds lost. And as we can see from Saturday, it's no more painfully clear than seconds matter here.
And finally, I'll put two questions together at the end. That suggests a lot more money, I would think. Just more manpower means more money to cover. And has it gotten harder over the last number of years to protect in a world where there are just a lot more guns? It's a lot more part of the culture. Is there something about the job that has gotten more difficult that would warrant more staffing, more spending?
I think so, and it goes back to what I just mentioned, the specialty teams. If they could hire, train, and develop more of those teams that were Secret Service assets, those are, specialized teams. They're like a military mechanized team. They need to be really operating from the same muscle movement. They need to know each other. They need to train together and see how each other will think and not have to worry about that. More money, more manpower is something that certainly can help because, as you know, the Secret Service now has more protectees probably than it's had in history when you talk about the main protectees, but as well as the residual, the family members, the cabinet secretaries that they have. So they definitely need more manpower. And I think, unfortunately, the Secret Service has been faced of late, like other law enforcement agencies, with attrition issues. I mean, for instance, I like to tell the story. I'm older now, but when I first applied to the Secret Service, process took over 3 years. Now they bring folks on in 6 or 8 months. And that's just the generational piece or, sort of the way things are. But at the same time, more manpower and always more training will help.
A.T. Smith, thank you so much for your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
New Jersey's Senator Bob Menendez will resign on August 20th. The announcement coming 1 week after he was found guilty of federal bribery charges. His resignation letter was read aloud in the Senate chamber Tuesday by Democratic Senator Peter Welch of Vermont. In the document, Menendez acknowledged his conviction and vowed to appeal, but wrote he didn't want the Senate to, quote, be involved in a lengthy process that will detract from its important work. Menendez was found guilty of 16 felony counts that he took bribes in the form of cash, gold bars, and a luxury car in exchange for political favors. The senator faced numerous calls to resign following the conviction, and some lawmakers threatened to hold a vote to expel him. Menendez's sentencing is scheduled for October 29th. He faces decades in prison. Israel's prime minister begins a busy week in the United States. Coming up, what Benjamin Netanyahu is saying about a hostage deal as the Israeli military bombards Gaza's second largest city. Plus, Delta Airlines is still struggling to recover following last week's global tech outage. Why the Transportation Department is now investigating. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Most airlines are back on schedule after a global software outage last Friday forced cancellations and delays. But Delta, like many of its passengers, still can't quite get things off the ground. The airline canceled another 400 flights Tuesday, according to the tracking website FlightAware, the 5th straight day of cancellations. The problems have led the Transportation Department to launch an investigation into Delta and the, quote, widespread flight disruptions and reports of concerning customer service failures. CBS News' Chris Van Cleve has the latest.
John, it is another tough day for Delta Airlines and its customers, but the airline says it is showing signs of improvement. Fewer cancellations today, hovering around 500 compared to more than 1,000 yesterday. Still a lot of delays. There's a sea of bags at every major Delta airport. Those will have to be delivered, of course, but the airline says it is making progress to getting back on track, but still continues to have some issues with its crew tracking system. It says that automated system is still not operating the way it should, so they're having to try to track crews manually, and that's part of why they're seeing still a lot of cancellations and a lot of delays, but the airline is hoping it is moving in the right direction. The company president told a convention of business travelers today the airline expects to be back to normal by Thursday or Friday. Now today, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, announced a formal DOT investigation into the IT outage at Delta and its customer service response. This comes as Senator Maria Cantwell, the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, which has oversight of airlines, sent a letter to Delta CEO Ed Bastian criticizing the airline's customer service response and calling on the airline to make improvements. Bottom line for flyers, some 500,000, DOT says, that have been impacted here. There are a lot of people that are still trying to get where they need to go, and this could go on for at least a few more days. John?
Chris Van Cleve in Los Angeles. Thank you very much, Chris. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a ceasefire deal that would see the return of Israeli hostages in Gaza is closer to becoming a reality, although he did not get into specifics on the status of negotiations. Netanyahu is visiting the United States this week. He will address members of Congress on Wednesday, the same day he is expected to meet with former President Donald Trump in Florida. That comes ahead of a White House visit on Thursday. But as CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata reports, not everyone at home is happy about the decision to leave Israel in the midst of a 9-month war. We want to warn you, some of the images in Deborah's report may be disturbing.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has left a country at boiling point. Furious protesters say instead of jetting off to Washington, he should focus on securing a hostage deal.
What is the aim? What is the purpose? What is the goal of his speech there? It means nothing for us.
Critics say Netanyahu wants to use this visit to bolster support for the continuation of his war in Gaza. He will have separate meetings with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and former President Trump this week. But former Israeli hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin says Biden is his least important meeting, as he thinks Netanyahu is hoping for a Trump presidency.
Netanyahu's message to Trump is, I'm not weak. I don't give in to terror. This war is not going to end until we eliminate the threat of Hamas.
This as the Israeli military intensified operations in Gaza's Khan Yunis in an area declared a safe zone. Displaced Palestinians said they'd received evacuation orders shortly before the bombing began yesterday, killing more than 70 people and sending hundreds of casualties streaming into overburdened hospitals. Among them, children, bloodied, broken and bereft. 18-month-old Sawar lost both her parents in another Israeli airstrike in central Gaza. Covered in shrapnel wounds, she barely clings to life. They've run out of hospital beds, so she's placed in a cardboard box. Outside on the street, this family who fled the latest round of bombings is sleeping rough. They're exhausted from constantly running, they tell our CBS producer Marwan Al-Ghul. This is genocide, said Hamda Al-Kara. All we want to do is live like other old people elsewhere in the world. It's as if they want to erase us. Former Israeli security and diplomatic officials have sent a letter to congressional leaders stating Netanyahu is unwilling to plan for the day after the war and continues to destabilize the national security of both Israel and the U.S., adding he is prioritizing his personal political survival, John, over the nation's shared interests.
Deborah Pata in Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Deborah. Now to a digest of some other foreign news. Government officials in Ethiopia say at least 229 people have died following two landslides in the southern part of the country that took place on Sunday and Monday. The victims include pregnant women, children, and police officers who'd been buried while searching for survivors. Authorities expect the death toll to rise and search and rescue efforts to continue. Mudslides and landslides are common in Ethiopia during its rainy season, which is expected to last until September. Unrest in Bangladesh has calmed slightly after the country's Supreme Court rolled back some government work quotas for some citizens. There were violent demonstrations over the initial rule nationwide from those who argued a shrinking number of positions would only go to supporters of the prime minister and her party. Officials say at least 174 people have died, including several police officers, in the demonstrations. More than 2,500 arrests have taken place. The government says it will ease a nationwide curfew starting Wednesday. Thousands of Canadian residents and visitors have been forced to evacuate as wildfires get closer to Jasper National Park in Alberta, in the western part of the country. Jasper, the Canadian Rockies' largest national park, is home to 4,700 residents. Last summer, smoke from several Canadian wildfires traveled as far south as Georgia, prompting severe air quality alerts along the East Coast. Still to come, new research shows many students are falling behind in school nearly 4 years after the pandemic. We'll take a look at what's behind the widening learning gap and what can be done to fix these setbacks. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
this case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has resigned the day after she faced harsh questioning from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle over the attempted assassination of former President Trump. In a letter to staff, Cheatle said she takes full responsibility for the incident. President Biden is back at the White House after recovering from COVID. Biden's doctor says he has tested negative and is no longer showing symptoms. This is Biden's first day back since dropping out of the 2024 race and endorsing Vice President Harris. New data shows Sunday was the world's hottest day ever recorded. EU climate experts say the global average surface air temperature reached almost 63 degrees Fahrenheit on July 21st, marginally higher than the record set last July. The record could be broken again this week as heat waves continue to scorch many parts of the world. 4 years ago, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, students across the country were forced to take their learning online. While things have returned to normal, research shows many are still falling behind academically. This is according to a new study released Tuesday by the NWEA, a testing company that works with more than 9,000 American school systems. For the 2023 to 2024 school year, average math and English test scores for students in nearly all grades were down from what they were pre-pandemic. Scores are at a new low from the previous low. Karen Lewis joins us now. She's the Director of Research and Policy Partnerships at NWEA and is the lead author of the study. So, Karen, remind us again exactly whose scores are worse in these findings.
Well, it's hard to pick just one group to be the most worried about who's doing worst. But when I look at the data, I'm most concerned about middle school students. These are students for whom we're seeing the least evidence of recovery. And for them, the gaps are not shrinking and, in fact, are widening to a lower point than we have seen throughout the pandemic. I'm also most concerned about students that were already struggling prior to the onset of the pandemic, students that are marginalized due to socioeconomic factors, due to race, ethnicity. Those were kids that were hardest hit by the pandemic and also remain furthest from recovery.
And Karen, was there no improvement since getting out of the thicket of COVID, or is it more there was some improvement, now there's backsliding?
That's the concerning part, that in the 21-22 school year, we were encouraged to see that growth had returned to pre-pandemic levels. And so we concluded, we got out the confetti cannons and felt like the worst is behind us, that students have started to recover. But data from the last 2 school years has not supported that conclusion. And students are making progress, but they're doing so at rates that are lower compared to pre-pandemic trends, which means we're not shrinking the gaps. And in many cases, they continue to widen.
So I'm keeping in mind 2 groups. There's the groups that come from those already socioeconomically stressed parts of the country, which have always had difficulty given the lack of resources and so forth. And then there's the other group. Is it just because of COVID, or is it other things? Are there other contributing factors that have resulted in this picture that you've painted for us here?
I think it's a complicated nest of factors, and COVID was certainly the initial shock to the system that has disrupted education in such a way that we see these detrimental effects. But the lingering impacts of COVID, particularly chronic rates of absenteeism that are higher than ever before, I think keep kids from the classroom, and that keeps them from learning. So there's no silver bullet to get us out of this mess, but there's a lot of contributing factors that we need to be targeting.
And let's now focus to what maybe is working. Two questions. The first one is, do we know what to target to make things better? Is there a list of at least things to target? And then I'll ask you how you target them in the next question.
Well, I want to be clear that our data focus on reading and math test scores, and that's one thin slice of the way kids have been impacted by this pandemic. And there are other factors to consider, their social and emotional well-being being a chief concern. But these data suggest that we are seeing levels of achievement in math and reading that are lower compared to pre-pandemic trends.
And so what can be done to address these issues? Does it mean small tutoring groups? Are there some approaches that have worked, Karen, to try to reverse these trends?
So we know what that happened during the pandemic was kids lost out on learning opportunities. And so the obvious solution is we need to add back in and double down on getting them additional learning opportunities. And you've named high dosage tutoring as a commonly used intervention. Summer school is also quite popular. Those are the types of strategies that get kids connected to additional learning opportunities that research suggests will work. The issue here is that the research that supports those tools was done in pre-pandemic times on very limited samples where it's very easy to implement. We're now asking schools to scale that to an exponential degree, which we know has been very challenging on the ground. Schools are not nimble entities that can turn around and at the drop of a hat be able to get tutoring to thousands of kids. So we know schools are doing the right things, and we hope that they continue. But we also want to be real about the challenges that they face with the sunsetting of ESSER. The federal dollars dedicated to support recovery efforts are going away this fall. And that does not match the timeline with which kids will actually recover from the impacts of this pandemic. So we will be asking schools and districts to continue those efforts with a reduced budget, which we understand is a very challenging set of circumstances.
So essentially do a great deal more with less money. So is there any, where does help come from? I mean, could the private money, do states need to up their education budgets? Does this need to be a federal push? Where can new resources be found?
I think we will take new resources wherever we can find them. I do hope the federal government will reconsider finding additional dollars to support states or schools and districts, but I think states are also going to be called into question to be able to step in. I think of this like if a hurricane swept through your town and did severe damage to your house, you wouldn't pay your contractor a set amount of money and hope that the damage would be restored. Instead, you'd say, here's money, keep going until the problem is fixed. We've essentially said to schools, we're going to give you a fixed amount of money, but now we know that's not enough. Those dollars helped and are the right ways to support kids, but more is needed. And so we don't want to leave schools and districts to carry the bill alone when we know they're not magicians. They can't just pull money out of a hat to keep these interventions going and are going to rely on federal and state support to be able to support kids.
Karen Lewis with NWEA. Really great data and great analogy. Thanks so much for being with us. Under the Paris Climate Agreement, the United States has an ambitious goal of reducing its greenhouse gas emissions to 50% of what they were in 2005 by the year 2030. A report released Tuesday says the nation is making headway towards that goal, but it likely won't hit it. Analysis from the independent research firm Rhodium estimates the United States will cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 38 to 56% by 2035. Meaning the country would miss its 2030 target. The firm says the U.S. would only see a reduction of 32 to 43% by that target date. The U.S. is one of the 194 countries pledging to slow down global warming and climate change by cutting emissions. While this report says the nation is off track for hitting its 2030 goal, it notes the fact that the United States has made decent cuts is a sign that federal initiatives like President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which include investments in clean energy, are producing results. Crews continue to battle wildfires across the West, like this one in Oregon. The Lone Rock Fire started more than a week ago, about 140 miles east of Portland, and it's only 40% contained. CBS News' Jonathan Vigliotti is in California, where investigators are working to determine the cause of another fire.
John, the Hayward fire in Riverside County scorched more than 500 acres, and officials now say it was sparked by fireworks. Investigators tonight now searching for a group of people captured on camera in the act before fleeing the scene. 6 homes were destroyed. More than $10 million in damage was caused. Across the West, dozens of wildfires are burning. As you mentioned, Oregon State hardest hit. 18 wildfires there, 4 of them described as megafires, each burning more than 100,000 acres of land. Here in California, there are a dozen active wildfires. So far this season, more than 3 million acres have been torched. To put that in perspective, last year at this point, it was 800,000 acres. CAL FIRE here in the state of California warning of a potentially volatile season, specifically pointing to the atmospheric rivers last winter, which dumped trillions of gallons of rain and snow, leading to the rapid regrowth of vegetation, which now in all of this heat is drying up and turning into a perfect fuel source for fire, John.
Jonathan Vigliotti, thank you. Coming up, Russia is increasing its disinformation campaigns online. Ahead, how the Kremlin is creating and spreading fake propaganda and who it's targeting. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Last month, a Russian disinformation network targeted European Union countries ahead of the EU Parliament elections. Now, U.S. officials warn that Russia could attempt to influence the 2024 election with propaganda posts. Our Nicole Skenga shows us some of the Kremlin's disinformation tactics online.
In early June, this video surfaced on identical websites claiming to be European news outlets, an alleged warning from the CIA about this month's Paris Olympics. But the video is a fake. The CIA said they didn't produce it, and CBS News linked it to Russian disinformation networks. CBS News confirmed producer Ariel Delzer traced the video's origin back to a pro-Russia military blogger with a following of more than 200,000. Designed to dupe unsuspecting readers online and spread fear of a possible terrorist attack ahead of the games. Part of a pattern of propaganda, this Russian disinformation campaign has also targeted the European elections and the 2024 Euro soccer tournament.
This is a popular tactic on Telegram with Russian disinformation networks that use this platform. They will post one sort of fake claim, whether it's a deep fake video or just text that is some sort of false statement. And from there, the other ones will reshare it in the Telegram app, and it will cycle through the whole network, if you will, by these accounts with sometimes millions of followers or just hundreds of thousands of followers.
CBS News confirmed tracked multiple networks exposing Russia's disinformation playbook.
It's part of a tactic called information laundering, seeding misleading narratives on fringe websites disguised as news sources in hopes they reach legitimate publications. Then they're amplified by pro-Kremlin users on social media platforms. The websites and accounts look like they're based in the European Union, but researchers say they're actually run out of Russia, and the companies behind them work directly with the Russian government.
A CBS News investigation found websites run by one Russian network churned out as many as 70 articles an hour ahead of the EU elections.
These Russian disinformation networks are getting better at using automation tools to churn out content quickly and cheaply.
Other networks now exploiting reports of anti-Semitic acts across Paris to undermine authorities, stoking fears about migration and crime, further spread by pro-Kremlin accounts.
Russians invented the word disinformation, effectively.
Brett Schaefer is a senior fellow studying disinformation at the Alliance for Securing Democracy.
What's new is whatever is out there in the ecosystem. So you have migration concerns, you have the recent EU elections, which is a nice sort of dovetail into the Olympics. So we've seen this sort of rise of the far right in France, in Germany, and other places. So all of the conflicts that we saw voters really care about in the elections, Russia latches onto them.
And now there are fears Russia could try this same tactic ahead of the U.S. election in November. But Schaefer cautions that Americans should trust the process.
Russian disinformation only works if real, authentic Americans play into it. If we're not part of the problem, if we're not spreading their narratives, if we are not doing harm to each other, their campaigns are not going to work.
And Nicole Skinner joins me now. Nicole, how's the U.S. government handling all of this? They know it's coming ahead of the November election.
Yeah, John, State Department officials have released several reports on Russian disinformation to raise awareness about these tactics. Officials are also warning that AI makes it easier for these campaigns to target and influence people. And certainly FBI Director Chris Wray has been saying that advances in generative AI are making their tactics more and more realistic and difficult to detect. Earlier this month, the Justice Department actually said it disrupted a covert Russian intelligence operation that used AI to spread propaganda in the U.S., Europe, and Israel. That campaign was centered on undermining support for Ukraine and stoking political divisions. The department also said it was working with Canada, the Netherlands, officials at X in seizing 2 internet domains in the U.S., and it ultimately took down 968 inauthentic accounts created by the Russian government.
And what are social media companies doing to stop this? And are all social media companies interested in stopping it?
Yeah, not all social media companies created equal here. Social media platforms have different policies on what kinds of content they're permitted on their platforms. Several companies, including Meta and Google, release regular reports on campaigns they take down. Others are less transparent. CBS News, we did reach out to Telegram and X. We've not heard back specifically on our reporting, but John, All of these networks are still active and are still producing content. It is worth noting, researchers say a lot of these Russian campaigns are falling short of duping the public writ large, in part due to media literacy campaigns. Experts, fact checkers, and officials calling out these tactics. But with the development of AI, there is concern that these disinformation networks are now capable of doing more with less.
So that leads me to the question, what can a regular person do, other than maybe just go read a good book, to be on the lookout and spot these kinds of social media campaigns or websites or even texts they might get that are trying to fool them?
Yeah, always recommend reading a good book. But first, when you're online, pause for a minute to understand what it is you're reading. What is the source? Are you familiar with them? Then take a look at what other credible outlets are reporting. Does the information you're seeing match? If not, probably best not to share. You matter to your network of friends and family. Research consistently shows us that Americans tend to trust the opinions of their inner circle more than even other members of their community, be it their doctor, their faith leader, their political leaders. That makes your voice online powerful to those who are closest to you, your friends and family. So if you see strange or suspicious stories popping up out of nowhere and they're being shared by questionable accounts, it's best to ignore it, John.
Information hygiene is a good way to be a good neighbor. I like that idea. Nicole Skanga in Washington. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Still to come, for $600, this legendary TV game show host is being featured on a U.S. Forever stamp. The answer? After the break. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now, we got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The Greek islands are suffering from a water crisis amid a busy summer tourist season. Several islands, including Leros, Sifnos, Naxos, and parts of Crete, have declared states of emergency over water shortages due to extremely low rainfall and unusually hot winters. As a result, reservoirs and underground water sources have been drying up. Authorities are now turning to desalination, turning your seawater into drinking water, as more tourists are expected to arrive in the islands over the next month. But that process is very costly and requires a large amount of energy. Mattel's first ever blind Barbie doll is hitting toy stores around the world. The doll was created in collaboration with the Royal National Institute of Blind People and the American Foundation for the Blind. She comes with a cane, sunglasses, easily adjustable clothing, and articulated elbow joints for realistic cane use. Her packaging also features Braille. The dolls join a series of inclusive Barbies which represent people with hearing loss, Down syndrome, and conditions which require the use of a wheelchair. Late Jeopardy host Alex Trebek will now be remembered forever. The U.S. Postal Service released a forever stamp Monday honoring Trebek on what would have been his 84th birthday. He died 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. The stamp features a Jeopardy-themed prompt. This naturalized U.S. citizen hosted the quiz show Jeopardy for 37 seasons. Underneath, you can see the answer written, "Who is Alex Trebek?" The stamp's release also celebrates the game show's 60th anniversary. Thank you for watching. America Decides begins after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.